What kind of woman was Gomer really? Was she simply a sinner whose name became a warning for generations? Or was she something more than that? A woman whose life became one of the most painful, mysterious, and controversial stories in the entire Bible? For many people, Gomer is one of the most misunderstood women in Scripture. Her name is often mentioned with shame, scandal, and betrayal. But if we stop at that, we miss the real power of her story. Because Gomer's story is not just about a broken woman. It is about a broken nation. It is about a wounded prophet. And more than anything, it is about a God whose love keeps reaching for people even when they keep running away. To understand Gomer, we have to step into a dark moment in Israel's history. This was not a time of spiritual strength. This was not a time when the nation was walking closely with God. Israel had become corrupt, divided in heart, and unfaithful to the covenant. They still had religious language. They still had rituals, but their hearts were far from the God who had rescued them. They chased idols. They trusted false gods. They gave their devotion to everything except the one who had loved them from the beginning. It was into this atmosphere that God called the prophet Hosea. Hosea was not just told to preach sermons. He was not only sent to speak judgment in the streets. God gave him a message that would be lived out in his own home, in his own marriage, and in his own heartbreak. The command God gave Hosea was shocking then, and it still shocks readers now. God told him to marry a woman named Gomer, a woman connected with unfaithfulness. That command alone has created centuries of debate. People have asked whether Gomer was already living an immoral life before Hosea married her, or whether she became unfaithful later. The Bible does not answer every question in the way modern readers would want, and maybe that is part of why her story still grips people. There is mystery in it, there is discomfort in it, and there's a sense that we are standing in front of something deeply personal and deeply symbolic at the same time. The Bible introduces her simply as Gomer, the daughter of Blame. That is almost all we are told about her background. No long family history, no personal explanation, no defense, no emotional details from her point of view. She appears suddenly, and from the very beginning, her life is tied to a message much bigger than herself. Hosea marries her, and what should have been a place of love, trust, and faithfulness becomes something else entirely. Their marriage becomes a living prophecy. Every part of it begins to reflect the relationship between God and Israel. This is where Gomer's story becomes far more than a personal scandal. In the Bible, unfaithfulness in marriage is used as a picture of spiritual unfaithfulness. Israel had entered into covenant with God, but instead of remaining faithful, the nation went after other gods, other loves, other securities. In that sense, Gomer's actions were not only about one woman and one marriage. They became a mirror held up to an entire people. And then the children are born. The names of these children are not ordinary names chosen for beauty or family tradition. They are prophetic signs. The first child is named Jezreel. That name carries the weight of judgment. It points to bloodshed, reckoning, and consequences that are coming. The second child is named Lo-Ruhamah, which means no mercy or not loved. The third is named Lo-Ami, meaning not my people. Imagine what it would have felt like to live in that household, where even the names spoken over the children carried sorrow, warning, and brokenness. These names are not random. They were messages from God to a rebellious nation. Through Hosea's family, God was declaring that Israel's sin had real consequences. Judgment was not just an idea floating in the air. It was now written into daily life. But the pain of the story does not stop there. Gomer does not remain faithful to Hosea. She turns away. She gives herself to other lovers. Whether this happened gradually or dramatically, the result is the same. The marriage is shattered by betrayal. The woman Hosea loved goes after others, and in doing so, she becomes an even sharper picture of what Israel had done against God. This is one of the reasons her story is so controversial. It is raw. It is uncomfortable. It forces readers to wrestle with things they would rather keep at a distance. Betrayal, shame, broken trust, humiliation, public pain. This is not a neat story. It is not polished. It does not protect our feelings. It confronts us with the ugliness of unfaithfulness and the devastation it causes. And yet, if we only see Gomer as a villain, we miss something vital. because the Bible is not presenting her story simply to humiliate one woman. Her life is being used to expose the condition of the human heart. Israel was Gomer. The nation had been loved, chosen, protected, and blessed, yet it kept chasing what could never truly satisfy. It kept running after false loves. And if we are honest, that pattern did not end with ancient Israel. People still do this today. They abandon truth for comfort. They trade faithfulness for desire. They leave what is holy in order to chase what is temporary. They look for identity, security, and pleasure in things that cannot save them. That is what makes Gomer's story so powerful. It is ancient, but it feels painfully current. At some point, Gomer's choices lead her into ruin. The woman who chased other lovers does not find freedom. She finds loss. The promise of pleasure gives way to bondage. The illusion of control collapses. What looked attractive from a distance leads her into disgrace. This is how sin works so often. It offers excitement, independence, and escape. But in the end, it takes more than it gives. It wounds. It enslaves. It empties. Gomer's fall is not only tragic because she betrayed Hosea. It is tragic because she became trapped in the very path she chose. And then comes the most shocking moment in the entire story. God tells Hosea to go again, to love again, to pursue again. This is where many people stop in disbelief. Why would Hosea do that? Why would he go back towards someone who had wounded him so deeply? Why would God ask such a thing? Why not let judgment speak for itself? Why not leave Gomer where she is? But that question opens the door to the deepest meaning of the story. Hosea goes to reclaim her. He finds her in a condition of humiliation and loss, and he pays a price to bring her back. He redeems the one who betrayed him. He buys back the woman who walked away. That scene is one of the most astonishing pictures in the Old Testament, because suddenly the story is no longer only about scandal. It becomes a story of redemption. Gomer is not merely exposed. She is pursued. She's not merely judged. She's bought back. This is the heartbeat of the Book of Hosea. God is showing Israel and everyone who reads this story after them what divine love looks like. It is not blind love. It is not careless love. God does not excuse sin. He names it. He judges it. He exposes it. But even after that, his mercy still reaches out. That is the tension of Gomer's story. Judgment is real. Sin is serious. Betrayal is devastating. But mercy is also real. Redemption is also possible. Love does not disappear just because rebellion has happened. For that reason, Gomer stands as more than a controversial woman in the Bible. She becomes a symbol of every person who has wandered, every heart that has strayed, every soul that has chosen lesser loves over the living God. And Hosea becomes a picture of something even greater. In his pain, in his pursuit, and in his willingness to redeem, he reflects the heart of God himself. The God who is wounded by human rebellion, yet still calls the unfaithful back. The God who refuses to pretend sin is harmless, but who also refuses to give up on the people he has chosen. That does not mean Gomer's story is easy. It is not. It raises hard questions. Some readers struggle with how she is portrayed. Others wonder how much of her story is literal and how much is symbolic. Some feel the weight of the marriage itself and ask why God would involve Hosea in such a painful calling. These are not shallow questions. They are serious questions. And part of the reason this story remains so controversial is because it does not answer all our emotional objections in simple ways. But perhaps that is because the story is meant to disturb us. It is meant to make us feel the cost of unfaithfulness. It is meant to show that sin is not just breaking a rule. It is breaking relationship. It is betraying love. It is walking away from the one who has been faithful. At the same time, the story is also meant to leave us speechless at the depth of God's mercy. Because the final word over Gomer is not simply shame. The final movement of the story is redemption. The God who judges is also the God who restores. The God who speaks hard truth is also the God who heals. That is why Gomer should not only be remembered as a controversial figure. She should also be remembered as part of one of the Bible's clearest pictures of grace. Not cheap grace. Not grace that ignores evil, but redeeming grace. Costly grace. The kind of grace that goes looking for the one who is lost and pays the price to bring them home. And maybe that is what makes her story so unforgettable. because many people see themselves in pieces of it, not necessarily in every outward detail, but in the deeper spiritual truth. Who has not wandered in heart? Who has not given their loyalty to things that did not deserve it? Who has not at some point loved created things more than the Creator? Who has not needed mercy after making choices that led to emptiness? Gomer's story tells us that human beings are capable of terrible unfaithfulness, but also tells us that God's mercy is deeper than most people dare to believe. This story also warns us not to romanticize rebellion. The path away from God is never harmless. Israel thought it could divide its heart and still remain secure. Gomer seems to have believed that other lovers offered something better, but both stories lead to the same truth. What pulls us away from God will eventually wound us. Idols always disappoint. Sin always carries a cost. What begins as desire often ends in bondage. Yet the beauty of this story is that bondage is not the end. Failure is not the end. Shame is not the end. For the one willing to return, there is still a voice calling them back. That is the untold power behind Gomer's story. It is not just about what she did wrong. It is about what God reveals through her life. He reveals that his love is not weak. It is strong enough to confront, strong enough to judge, and strong enough to redeem. He reveals that covenant matters. Faithfulness matters. Holiness matters. But he also reveals that mercy has not disappeared. So who was Gomer? She was a real woman in a painful story. She was the wife of a prophet. She was part of a marriage that became a message to a nation. She was a symbol of unfaithfulness, but also a sign that God does not stop pursuing people when they fall. She was controversial, yes. Misunderstood, yes. But she was also part of one of Scripture's most profound revelations of divine love. In the end, Gomer's story is not only about her. It is about Israel. It is about humanity. It is about all the ways people turn from God and all the ways God still calls them back. It is a story of heartbreak, judgment, shame, mercy, and redemption woven together in a way that few Bible stories dare to be. And maybe that is why her story still matters so much today. Because we live in a world that knows betrayal very well. A world that knows broken relationships, hidden shame, wounded trust, and restless hearts. But Gomer's story reminds us that even in a world like that, redemption is still possible. God still speaks. God still calls. God still restores. So the next time you hear the name Gomer, do not think only of controversy. Think of a mirror held up to the human soul. Think of a love that was rejected. Think of mercy that kept moving anyway. And think of the God who still goes after the unfaithful. Not because sin does not matter, but because his redeeming love is greater than our ruin. If this story challenged you or opened your eyes in a new way, share your thoughts in the comments. What part of Gomer's story struck you the most? And if you want more deep Bible stories like this, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and stay with us for the next untold story from Scripture.